Hi, I'm Maggie Carter, Global Lead for AWS Social Impact, and I'm honored to be joined here today by Aidan McDonald, Program Manager of Justice Through Code at Columbia University, for today's We Power Tech Lightning Talk. Today we will discuss Justice Through Code's work with returning citizens, where they focus on technology to reintegrate citizens back into society. Hi, Aidan. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're doing at Justice Through Code?
First off, Maggie, thank you for having me. Really excited to be here today and to tell you about my journey that led me to start Justice Through Code and the important work we're doing to solve the crisis of mass incarceration. As you know, 5 years ago, when I was 27, my life was completely destroyed when I was arrested for my involvement in marijuana distribution years earlier in my early 20s. As I sat in county jail the first few days after my arrest, I couldn't help but think to myself, my life was over. I'd never have a career or dream of having the stability in my life that would allow me to have a family or live a life that so many of us dream of. Fortunately, while I was incarcerated, I was housed in an institution where I had the opportunity to return to school. For me, this was something that was strange because as a child, I had really struggled with school growing up. At a young age, I had been diagnosed with learning disabilities and had spent most of my time educated in classes separate from my peers, which led me to really internalize a feeling of being an other and like I didn't belong in the classroom. Ironically, returning to school while I was incarcerated, where I didn't have to go to a classroom where I felt out of place, allowed me for the first time in my life to feel at home in an educational environment. Finally feeling like I belonged in a learning environment allowed me to thrive. I spent all of my days working on my schoolwork, talking to my family about how they should send me books, and talking to friends and spending the whole day on my studies, and I'd come back to my bed at night and read. About a year before I was scheduled to return home, I decided to do something really crazy and apply to Columbia University to finish my undergraduate degree. And about 3 months before I was scheduled to return home, I received an email from my mother. She told me, call me right away. Picked up the phone, I called her, and my mom was crying. And I had been accepted into Columbia University. And for the first time since I had been arrested and I had sat in county jail 4 years earlier, I felt hope in my life, the promise of a better life through the promise of education. Unfortunately, when I returned home, I met a very different reality in a world that judged me for something that I had done years earlier. And as I went and searched for jobs in the months before I started school, I would make it to the final round of interviews. And even though I had started 2 businesses in between my involvement in the marijuana industry and my having gone to prison, and the fact that I had been to Columbia, it didn't matter. As soon as somebody saw the fact that I had a felony on my record and that I had been to prison, even with the attitudes of marijuana changing in America, I would have the job offers rescinded. Fortunately enough for me, though, a few months before I was scheduled to start at Columbia, I was offered a job at the Center for Justice, a place at Columbia that's focused on ending mass incarceration and criminalization. A few months into my work there, I really couldn't help but think about the struggles of so many other people who had been less fortunate than me who were coming home. These were people that were my friends, who I had spent years of my life with at this point, and who would come home to their sons and their daughters and not be able to get a job to help contribute to their families. And so I gave a lot of thought of what can we do as a university to leverage our expertise and resources to assist with this problem, with a real understanding that even if someone were fortunate enough, as I was, to be accepted into school, that the ability to afford time in school and spend 2 to 4 years of your life is something that a lot of people don't have the ability to do. So I started working on Justice Through Code, which is a program that provides technical and interpersonal skills training to support formerly incarcerated individuals in their career transition into the technology workforce, and really working on providing them with the promise of education, of providing a hope for a better future, which was something that I was lucky enough to have when I learned of my acceptance at Columbia.
Thank you for sharing your powerful story, Aiden. That's the first time you've said it to me, so thank you for sharing it. We're excited to be collaborating with Justice Through Code. Why is the work that you're doing so important?
Yeah, I think to answer this question, you really have to think about the crisis of mass incarceration in this country. The United States, with 5% of the world's population, has 25% of the global prison population. In any given year, we have 2.2 million incarcerated individuals in this country, 600,000 of which will return home every year. But a year after release, 75% of these people will be unemployed. And to really understand the crisis of mass incarceration, you also have to look at the communities that are impacted. And this is something that was a very profound thing for me to see, and what drives so much of the work that I'm doing. Mass incarceration disproportionately affects communities of color, and these are also the communities that have the hardest time securing employment when they come home. For someone like myself, as a white male who has a history of incarceration, I know that the unemployment rate for black males is 2 times higher than for white males. And so we see that this is an issue that really affects the communities in this country that are most marginalized, and really limits people who have been incarcerated to this very limited view of our lives. As I mentioned, I was incarcerated for a crime that I committed when I was 21 years old. I'm now 32, and it's something that I'm still constantly judged for, that I have to worry about when I meet somebody that I may potentially date, or if I'm interviewing for a job, or all of these other things. I'm constantly confronted with the fact that there's a certain perception of me as somebody that's dangerous and untrustworthy because I've been incarcerated. And so we really have to put our energy into this work to uplift the communities that have been affected by systemic racism and mass incarceration, but also to allow people like myself to have a future and to dream that there could be something better for us, and that we can fulfill our potential. And we can't do that without having a pathway to meaningful employment. And so the work that we're doing, is focused around this in a very profound way, and that we're not just focused on supporting individuals in their job search, but also in creating the future leaders of the tech industry to really challenge these negative stereotypes and to show people what can be done if you grant opportunity and resources to people. It really is a profound teaching. It drives so much of what I've done. It's what I think about every day in my work and in my studies at Columbia, that, we really have this responsibility to each other to do better.
You talked about lack of opportunity for returning citizens and identifying work or employment at a reasonable wage. And you talked about the cycle. Can you give us some more insights on how Justice Through Code shifts the narrative for participants?
Yeah, I think to understand this or to think about this, you really have to put yourselves in the mind of somebody that's returned home from prison, such as myself. Um, as I mentioned to you, coming back home, even after having been accepted to Columbia, um, you're confronted with this reality that just makes you feel like you're never going to amount to anything, right? It's just inescapable. And even for myself, now a couple years after returning home, it's something that I still think about every day. And so I think the program is really focused around redefining what's possible for formerly incarcerated individuals, in a way that we can have our students serve as leaders for other returning citizens in what's possible. I think it's really difficult to imagine yourself in a space, whether or not that be at a tech company or at a school or anything else, unless you've seen somebody that you identify with in one of those spaces. And I think, for myself, I understand as a white male, it's easier for me to envision myself in a lot of these places because there's more people that look like me in these places, even if I have a history of incarceration. And so I think, for us working with our students, it's so important to provide that bridge to be in spaces that in many places are shaping the future direction of our country. And I think we do this, again, by really working with people that are going to serve as leaders and challenge the negative stereotypes of the formerly incarcerated. We have students now that are working at major tech companies and are continuing in their educational journeys, and they're really showing people that all these assumptions that they make about them are wrong. And I think that that's so important for us to support the change in the lives of our students, but also in a larger way with society, so that we can really work on these fair chance hiring practices and, as we often say in the program, give people not a second chance, but a first chance at the life that privileged Americans enjoy from birth.
Can you also, following up on that, can you dive a little deeper on what are some of the technical skills or coding skills that your students are graduating with coming through the program?
Yeah, so our program focuses on teaching the fundamentals of programming in Python. And as I mentioned, also interpersonal skills that are essential to success in the technology workforce. So we separate the program into 3 distinct phases. The first phase we call the Python Bootcamp. And that phase we really focus on teaching the fundamentals of programming in Python. From there, we have a section that's focused on data analysis and APIs. And then we have a final capstone software project where groups of 2 students work together to conceptualize, design, and then build their own software project. Had a lot of really great, interesting projects during the last cohort that we had. While we were still in person, we had 2 women who were in our program that were constantly getting stuck in the rain on their way to class, and were very frustrated about that, rightly so. And so they worked with a text message API and a weather API to automate sending themselves text messages in the morning if there was rain or snow in the forecast so they would never get stuck in this situation again. And in addition to that, we have students that work with mentors from a lot of the top tech companies during the last month of the course and the 2 months afterwards to support them in the development of those projects, but also as they embark on their career journey and think through their next steps and build their educational plan for the following year. So yeah, really cover a lot of material and really give our students the base knowledge that they need to embark on their career journey.
And are there any, say, anecdotes from students and their experiences that you want to share?
Wonderful anecdotes. I think it's the great privilege of the work that I get to do and that my colleagues get to do working on this program. There are a few, or many, I should say, standouts. I think one of the most impactful ones for us was one of our students who, like myself, had struggled with mental health issues when she was younger and had found herself in county jail after having struggled with drug use issues, and actually found out that she was pregnant while she was spending her first day in jail, realizing that she would be facing a prison sentence. Our student, she was fortunate enough to be incarcerated in a place where she was able to have her daughter and live with her in a prison nursery for the first year of her daughter's life, and was fortunate enough to be released to a work release program in New York, where she was able to live with her daughter and be this fantastic mother that she is to her daughter. And when she started with our program, she had no prior programming experience. She actually was able to leave her job and really focus full-time on our program. And just 3 weeks after she finished, she started a apprenticeship at one of the top tech companies in the country. And to talk to her and hear her tell us about how excited she was that her daughter, who was just over 2 years old at the time, would now be able to go to preschool, and that she could pay for her to go to college one day, and that just the trajectory of her life would completely change, was just like so powerful, right? This life-altering experience, which, we say in the program, like, I mean, we were here to support her in her educational journey, but this is just somebody that we're constantly in awe of, and just feel so privileged to have been able to have her in the program. And I think this touches upon something that is something that you understand if you've been incarcerated, which is people that are incarcerated are brothers or sisters or aunts or uncles or grandfathers, and they're family members, they're members of communities, and they're people that have children, right? And there are children across this country that are growing up without their parents, and their parents are coming home and not able to support them because of this inability to find a sustainable wage, because we basically give somebody a life sentence when we send them to prison, because we constantly judge them for the rest of their lives by that one act, right? You have to think to yourself right now, the worst thing you've done in your life. What if for the rest of your life, whenever you interviewed for a job or got to know somebody closely, that they knew that thing about you, and that it was, something that you were constantly had to confront. And so I think that's just been so powerful, because we realize that, if you separate even from the individual who ends up incarcerated or the act that leads them there are many people that are innocent to the charges who are negatively affected. And I think that's why it's so important to do this work, not just to support the individual, but also for us to really examine as a country, as organizations, as companies, is this the type of person that we want to be? That we're not only restricting the lives of individuals that have been incarcerated, but also holding back their families and increasing the likelihood that their children end up incarcerated. I mean, we know that for a child born into the bottom 10% of wealth in this country, they're 20 times more likely to end up incarcerated than a child born into the top 20% or 10% of wealth. And so I think, this seeing that impact just really drives us in our work and in our understanding that we can all be more compassionate people and really focus on what this issue means and what a commitment to fair chance hiring means for everybody within our society.
Thank you, Aiden, for sharing those stories and sharing more information about how Columbia and through the Justice Through Code program is, really changing the narrative for these returning citizens by teaching them both the soft skills and the technology needs to reintegrate them into society. And I'd say, it's been a privilege speaking with you today, and we're proud to collaborate with Columbia University on the Justice Through Code program. So thank you.